Hi, this is John Linneball, and I'm with John Linneball Tutoring, and we're going to cover SAT and ACT English Writing and Grammar Conciseness. As it says here, it is imperative and very important to be concise and avoid excessive wordiness. This is not very concise at all. What we're covering here: what is conciseness or concision? Why do we need to know this? How do I know when I'm not being concise? Is it always bad not to be concise? How do I know when an ACT or SAT answer is not concise? If you like this video, please don't forget to give this a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and click on the little bell in the top right corner for notifications. What is conciseness or concision? It's not using too many words, that is verbosity, and it's not repeating yourself, which would be redundancy. Compare "it is imperative and very important to be concise and avoid excessive wordiness" to "it is imperative to be concise." Both sentences mean the same thing, but the second sentence is faster to read and easier to understand. You could also say it's very important to be concise, or it is very important to avoid excessive wordiness. Notice that be concise and avoid excessive wordiness mean the same thing, so saying both is redundant. The same applies to imperative and very important. Verbosity is not always redundant, using phrases such as "despite the fact that" instead of "although" is also verbose, even though it's not redundant. It just uses more words than you necessarily need to. So, should I say conciseness or concision, you might ask? It doesn't matter, just know what conciseness or concision means. According to StackExchange.com, concision is a more recent literary critic's word, and conciseness is probably more familiar to the average Anglophone, that is, someone who speaks English. Use the one that better suits your audience. In an academic paper, use concision. In more informal prose, use conciseness. And here's the URL for that, and here's the URL to which the Stack Exchange quote here cites. So how do I know when I'm not being concise? It's simple. If you can think of a shorter way to say the same phrase without losing meaning or tone, use the shorter way. Otherwise, you're being verbose. And remember that for the SAT and the ACT. The shortest answer that does not change the meaning or the tone is going to be the right answer. If it's shorter, but it's not grammatically correct, or it changes the meaning or it changes the tone, then it is not the right answer. So again, pick the shortest answer that does not change the meaning or the tone and is still grammatically correct. If you're using a modifier, for example, an adjective or an adverb that's already implied by the meaning or the word or phrase being modified, you're being redundant except as noted below. So if you say something is red in color, well, we know red is a color. You don't have to say that. A distance of 5 miles. We know 5 miles is a distance. You could just say 5 miles. The late, great comedian George Carlin would say something like that. Everyone knows 5 miles is a distance. You can just say, I am going to walk 5 miles. You're not being redundant if you're defining a word or phrase that isn't common knowledge. For example, constitutional malice, the making of a damaging statement about a person or entity either with actual knowledge of its falsity or reckless disregard for its truth or falsity, is what, in quotes, public figures must prove in order to win when they sue for libel. Notice you could also define public figures as people who are famous, well-known, have access to the media to contradict statements about them that are false, contradict false statements about them. That would also be something you could define here, and that would not be redundant since most people wouldn't know the legal definition of a public figure. And if you're interested, the case to which I am alluding here is New York Times versus Sullivan, which separates public figures from ordinary people in constitutional case law involving defamation. That's why tabloids can publish things about celebrities that may or may not be true and get away with it. Let's move on. Is it always bad not to be concise? No, not always. For example, if you're trying to teach a lesson, as I am here, you probably should repeat yourself to make sure the learner understands your point. So that's why you're hearing me repeat myself and be verbose and not concise all over the place here. Being verbose can be humorous and can also be used to obfuscate, that is, to hide the meaning by using terms that are hard to understand. It can also be used to make a point, as I'm doing here. Redundancy can be very funny and educational. Redundancy is often used as a source of humor or for other stylistic purposes. For example, some very old jokes, some educational, involve redundancy. Cheers' Frasier Crane said to Woody in the old TV show Cheers, "The three most important things in real estate are location, location, and location." However, the ACT and SAT people don't get humor or style involving redundancy. And redundancy can be funny, as I'm stating redundantly. For example, in that Cheers scene, Woody replied, "But Dr. Crane, those are all three the same thing." He also couldn't accept Dr. Crane's explanation that redundancy was to make the point that by far the most important thing in real estate is location. But Woody, that's the point, is that real estate is the location is the most important thing in real estate. But Dr. Crane, those three things are all the same thing. So that's funny. So remember, the ACT and SAT people are very much like Woody. They just don't get it. So if you're doing it for humor or style or emphasis, they're still going to think it's wrong. We find similar humor in music. George Thorogood's I Drink Alone. I drink alone, yeah, with nobody else. When I drink alone, I prefer to be by myself. Okay, it's probably better to hear him. So we will.
I drink alone, yeah, with nobody else. Yeah, you know when I drink alone, I prefer to be by myself.
And, of course, MASH's Radar O'Reilly often made such statements as when he exclaimed, "They were naked with no clothes on!" Humor and emphasis when redundancy helps. Another really old joke is a tourist arrives in Manhattan and wants to go to a music concert at a very famous venue. He asks a passerby, "How do I get to Carnegie Hall?" The passerby replies, "Practice, practice, practice." So it's for emphasis and humor in one redundant phrase. And here's the same joke stated a slightly different way. "How do I get to Carnegie Hall?" "Practice, man." Intentional or not, verbosity can be funny. Government and industry, or big business, frequently use many words where few would do in an attempt to soften the impact of language or conceal incompetent, unethical, or criminal behavior. We can hear that in many routines by George Carlin, one of which I cite in my other videos. Academics and attorneys often use needlessly complex language to describe simple ideas in order to make them sound more difficult, and therefore make themselves sound more intelligent, or make it more difficult to understand a paper, a contract, or a statute. Some examples of humorous verbosity. The structure underwent rapid oxidation, causing a critical decrease in structural integrity. Translated into more understandable English, more concise English, the building caught fire and collapsed. My previous position involved the removal of organic particles from a porcelain substrate using ionic and non-ionic surfactants. Translated, my previous job was washing dishes. This could also describe a job cleaning toilets. You'd be removing a different kind of organic particle from porcelain, but the same thing. Surfactants, in case you're wondering, are things that make other things more soluble. So soap is a surfactant. Detergents contain ionic and non-ionic surfactants that make it easier for water to dissolve dirt. We will enforce our rights to the extent permitted by law. Sometimes you'll see things like this printed on packaging and warranties. You might get a threatening letter from an attorney. And when they say something like that, to the extent legally permitted, what they really mean is, we're not sure what the law is or what our rights are here, but we want to sound threatening. How do I know when an ACT or SAT answer is not concise? Well, it's simple. The answer choice will either be redundant in itself, so example, if choice D is prompt and on time, well, being prompt means being on time, so that's redundant, or repeat information given in a non-underlined part of the section. That is the writing section, multiple choice, English section on the ACT, that's part of the writing section on the SAT. So, an example of the latter is, in the rain-soaked city of Seattle, the frequent rains cause people to buy many umbrellas. The answer choices might be A, no change, B, frequent precipitation spurs umbrella sales. Had a little trouble saying that. Anyway, let's say it again. Frequent precipitation spurs umbrella sales. C, the fact that it often rains makes people purchase umbrellas, or umbrellas sell quite well. So what would the answer be there? Give you a little second to think about it. Little second. Boom. Answer D. Since the non-underlined part already labels Seattle as rain-soaked, mentioning that it often rains or there is frequent precipitation is redundant. Therefore, the correct answer would be to omit any further reference to rain and simply state that umbrellas sell well there. Let's move on. Another example. Edgar Allan Poe lived in the city of Baltimore in the state of Maryland. Okay, first answer could be no change. Second answer, had his residence in the city of Baltimore, a municipality in the state of Maryland, one of the United States of America. C was domiciled in the United States city of Baltimore in the one of the United States. Okay, the one, that's an extra the, so we know that would be wrong. United States, namely Maryland, or lived in Baltimore, Maryland. Well, okay, had his residence is more verbose than saying lived in, so we know that's wrong. Also, city and municipality are the same thing, so B, these would be redundant, city and municipality. The state of Maryland, one of the United States of America, same thing. Was domiciled, okay, in the United States, well, that's a fancy pants way of saying lived in. United States city of Baltimore and one of the United States, namely Maryland. Okay, you can see there are all sorts of words there. You know that Maryland is a state in the U.S., therefore it's also, any city in Maryland would also be a United States city, so you could remove both, or at least one of the United States. Lived in Baltimore, Maryland. Makes the most sense. Pretty much anybody actually reading that passage would know Baltimore is a city in Maryland, which is in the United States. You could possibly say Baltimore, Maryland in the United States of America, but anyway. Here's Edgar Allan Poe, one of Baltimore's most famous citizens, and after whom the football team, the Ravens, is named. And here is, of course, Edgar Allan Poe, or Winnie the Pooh, if you prefer, as a little joke. So, did you find this video useful? If you did, please like it and subscribe to this channel. Neither action costs you anything. You'll be alerted about my new videos. Why do I care? It's simple. YouTube doesn't let me share any ad revenue unless I have 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours, which is 240,000 minutes of view time in a year. While many people are watching these, I don't have 4,000 hours of watch time yet, and I don't have anywhere near 1,000 subscribers. For the same reasons, you're not only welcome, but encouraged to share links to this video, put it in playlists, etc., as long as you give me credit. I'm also always happy to read and respond to constructive criticism or suggestions for new videos. I reserve the right to delete comments from and block those who specialize in destructive criticism, trolls, or things that are off topics, spammers, disturb people. I get a few of those once in a while. I'm going to block those. As long as you're not them, great. And thanks for watching. Have a good day.